Yeah, it's a great cover. It has that I think the colors you had mentioned the colors and the colors are very eye catching. The gold and the
Yeah, one of the reasons why I picked that color, like, and this is how obsessive I get, Steve. I'll give you just one example. um, I wanted the book to stand out visually when you see it, when you're just glancing by, because it's an indie book, it's a longer book. I, a no-name person coming into the the industry, into the community. Um, I wanted it to visually at least be able to stand out as much as I feel the material inside deserves. Like I feel like it should at least catch an eye where somebody scrolling by will go, wait a minute, what's that? Let's go back to that. Or somebody who glances at a bookshelf, it will like pop out in their eye and they'll go, oh, okay, I'm gonna look at that real quick.
Hello friends, my name is Steve and I'm here today with author Thomas Howard Riley, the author of We Break Immortals. I think it doubles as a weapon. But Thomas, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's real good to be here, Steve.
Yeah, thanks for accepting my invitation.
Oh,
And
you bet.
on your bio, when I was trying to get questions ready for you, it mentions on there if you aren't weird, you aren't worth knowing. So thankfully, I'm a fellow weirdo, so I think we'll be fine.
Yes, that's kind of my motto. Um, as a fellow weird person, I like to let everybody know it's okay to be a little weird. It's okay to be an immaculate oddball.
Yeah, thankfully, it's in vogue these days, so that's
Mhm.
makes it easier. Yeah. So tell us about We Break Immortals.
Well, basically, the summary of it is it's about a drug addict who hunts down sorcerers, swordsmen that nobody seems to know very well, and a magic wielding woman who is hell bent on revenge, and they all get tangled up uh, in the hunt for a superhuman serial killer who's trying to make himself into a god.
Oh, okay. So where did the idea for this story come from? Has it been with you for a while?
Yes, yeah, the general idea of it for a very long time. It's sort of come together in fits and starts over many years. Um, until just this past year, the inspiration for the rewrite to be in what its current iteration is, the final version. Uh, that's when the final kind of spark hit me of what I wanted it to be. But
Hmm.
pieces of it have been being added on over the years until it came to be what it finally is.
So how many years have you been tossing this idea around for the story?
Well, off and on, probably close to, I would say close to 20.
Oh wow.
If you go back to the very first, like some people go on a trip somewhere, like the first time I put pen to paper about it. But there were large breaks in between. Like I would go, like I wrote the book, the whole book, uh, and then decided I hated, three quarters of it and trashed it, and then rewrote the three quarters, and then uh, you know ruminated on it for a few years, and then trashed 50% of that and rewrote it,
Oh wow.
um, and then at that point I did not feel like it was the story the way I wanted it to be. I didn't have the storytelling capability to understand why. Like I couldn't pinpoint what it was
Hmm.
that was missing from it, and so I just kind of put it aside and started, because I'd really fallen in love with this world I had created, because I go kind of crazy with my world building, and so I developed this entire expansive world, and I had a lot of ideas for these same characters, and so I just kind of like started writing on drafts of potential sequels for it, just writing
Hmm.
material like, hey, what would happen next? And I just went on and on and on for years, and never really looked back at that first book because I had never really planned on, publishing it in any real fashion. I would like vanity publish it, as I say, to as I tell people, like, so I could say to my mom, "Hey, mom, look, I'm on Amazon, like real people," you know. Uh, so and I just kind of let it sitting there, and then I finally got this big push in the tail end of 2020 when my son was born to give it another go of really trying to do it and not just writing for the sake of writing and really try to share with people, what I had. But I still hadn't gotten over the fact that I didn't really like. There was this unexplainable thing that I didn't like about my own first book. So I was like, I can't really. How can I talk about how great the sequel is when I myself hate the first? The first. So I sat there and really thought about it and really tried to drill down to it and sought out resources, online, other authors, other tutorials, just anything to try to crack that nut open and figure out what it was that was missing. And finally, I kind of arrived at that result after a series of that, and it started the rewrite that came to be the version that it is right now.
Hmm.
And the version that it is right now is uh, it follows some of the same track as the third version that I had from years before, but every line of dialogue is new. Every you know all of the prose pretty much has been replaced. It was almost line by line, rewrite. Um, and new characters, new location. There was a lot of revision involved. Steve, let me tell you, it is not my usual formula for writing and revising a book. So I'm thankful this is the only time that I have to do it this way. Because going forward, I have a full understanding of where I want to go
Hmm.
and what's going on. But yeah, it was really neat, honestly, to figure out and solve that puzzle finally. That had been nagging me for years and years and years.
So when
So,
you found that thing, how did you know that that was the answer, that the piece that was missing?
um, well, it came together. Um, well, basically, what I found that there were two things missing, really. One was the focus of the story itself, because this book is partially kind of a little uh, detective book. Like the one of the main characters is pursuing what he thinks is, and it goes through. I don't want to give away the plot in the beginning of our chat. I don't want to drop the spoilers right at the beginning. But a significant portion of it is this character who can track the residue of magic. Like he can track the leftover uh, stuff, kind of basically like CSI. Like
Mhm.
he can uh, and pursue people who commit crimes or atrocities or what have you. Um, and so a significant portion of it is him doing that. And in the earlier versions of the book, the focus was heavily on that aspect, heavily on the hunting, the pursuit, the technical aspects of it, and it was really focused around that. When the story itself and the series, because this is the first in the series, is focused around where that magic comes from, what people do with it, and it's not so much to do with the technical aspects of how they track the magic or hunt people or figure out who did what with it. It's more about what societies and cultures and individuals do with that information and how they treat people who use magic with that. Do they use those methods to welcome people with open arms? Do they have, a tentative, agreement with those type of people, or do they, uh, oppress those people using these methods of tracking magic and then try to hold them down or exterminate them in some cases. I have a pretty big world, so there's a lot of different cultures that you can sort of see a little bit of the map up there.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of different cultures in this world that I've created, and they all have their own version uh, of how they treat their magic users, and some of them diverge pretty significantly.
Hmm. And how did you keep track of everything when you started writing it? Do you have spreadsheets or cards, or how do you keep track?
um, for up until probably last year, I had little notebooks, those little Moleskine notebooks, the little tiny black ones,
Wow.
and as a point of fact, I write incredibly small with my actual handwriting, and so the regular ones were too big of lines. I had to get the quad ruled ones with the extra
Wow.
small lines, and then I would write 2 lines per line of square in there. And I
Wow.
had like my kind of like a world building Bible, that I kind of kept track of things in, and would go back and change things around and here and there. And only in the past year or so have I sort of converted to more digital organization, um, such as it is. But yeah, I do. I have multiple methods of keeping track of stuff. None of them would be what anyone would call very efficient, but it's there at least. I do keep track in some ways.
So I guess as long as you know where it is, that's what matters, right?
Correct. I know where to go looking to find it.
Yeah.
But like some people who have world building Bibles, they have like the tabs with every topic, or the page number and reference number and line number. And I know to scroll, if I want this topic, I need to scroll down about 30% down a 200-page long document. So that's the best I can do.
It's funny you mentioned that you write really small because when I was in high school, my English teachers would get really angry with me and say, "You write too small." But I don't know if
I,
it was
I should have brought the notebook and tried to zoom in on it, because yeah, it's someday I'll show some people with like maybe like a penny or something for reference, because it's absurd.
yeah.
But
What kind of do you have a certain kind of pen that you prefer?
I just get whatever the smallest, whoever has the smallest point, like the
Mm,
point one or point three. Like for a long time I was using art pens, because the regular office pens only went down to like point five, and I found these sets of art pens, where I would then spend $20 to buy 5 pens, throw away four of them, and then just use the one with the point one millimeter point. But anyway, but yeah,
yeah.
I use the finest point possible to make the lightest little touch of ink, uh, to accommodate my handwriting.
Wow. What
I
what
mean, I
type of
can write larger, um, but when I'm doing a notebook, you know I'm fairly nearsighted, so I can see things up close extremely well. Um, the glasses are for far away things.
yeah, I can relate to that for sure. And when you do write digitally, what's your favorite writing software or what's your preferred writing software?
Oh, I just use like a normal word processor for the most part, to keep track of things. I just kind of like, I know a lot of people use, like you were saying, spreadsheets or special software. I'm just very basic, like word processor document, and I just kind of know around about where each topic of material that I'm looking for is in that document, and then I just zip up, scroll up to it.
Hmm,
At this point, there's so much material that it would take me a humongous amount of time to try to separate it all out and parse it all into a spreadsheet. And so I'm not ready yet, Steve, to take that step. Even though I know I probably should, I'm not ready, in my heart, to
yeah.
take that work upon myself yet.
Well, not only that, but once you start that process, because you know where everything is now,
Mhm.
it will just kind of instinctively know where to find what you need.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. There's the you have to unlearn where it used to be and get rid of that muscle memory in the brain.
Yeah, that's tough. And I love the cover art on the book.
Oh,
How
me
did
too. It
how did that
came
come?
out so well. Yeah, Omer is my artist, and he did a fantastic job. I put I conceptually wise, like I was very strictly controlling the concept of it and the colors and the orientation, and he was so terrific to work with, Omer Burakono, who's done a number of fantasy covers in the indie and non-indie community. So but yeah, it turned out better than I could have ever anticipated. Like, he took all of what I wanted to do and wanted it to be. Uh, and I could do a whole video on just explaining where my head was at when I kind of chose the aspects of it that I wanted to be and the colors I wanted to be. But he responded to everything and so quickly, and it's just impresses the heck out of me for sure that he
Yeah.
was able to do something so beautiful off of all of my chaotic uh, where my brain was going.
So did you look for a while for an artist, or did you just happen to find him first?
Oh, I as with everything related to self-publishing, when I get to the point where I need to do something, I go on a mad dash of insane internet searches, spending hours upon hours, days upon days, scanning different sites, scanning Twitter, scanning Facebook, looking for artists, uh, uh, going on ArtStation, Fiverr, some of the sites that are like uh, their business model is creating covers for indie authors and stuff like that. I looked at some of those. So when I started out, I had no idea uh, what I wanted to do or what kind of art I wanted to have. Like, well, I mean, I had a feeling about it, but if you had asked me describe what you want the art to look like, I would have been staring at a brick wall for like hours trying to even put it into words. But I had stumbled across a couple of artists, and the the first one ended up they didn't do commissions at
Mm,
all. So I was like, oh, okay, because I was looking at all kinds of art and artists, like not just people who were like seeking out, for fantasy and stuff. And then, but this one I zoomed in on because I saw another author who had a cover. Because I was at the point where I was going through every book cover of every indie author, and then finding out who did that cover, and then searching them out one by one, um, and then going through their entire portfolios and stuff. Like, it was a real intensive process. I tend to get very obsessive, Steve, when it comes to things like that. My world building and the length of the book might tell you that my head tends to go pretty crazy. Um, but once I stumbled across this particular art, like it would, um, Omer's portfolio was. I still couldn't even describe what it is about it. It just had that zing that I wanted. It had that intangible quality that just like perfectly fit what my vision was, and I was like, okay, I think this person can uh, bring to life my vision for what the cover will be.
mm. Was that hard to kind of give that control to someone and say, "This is what my vision is," and kind of because it's a big decision, cover art.
It definitely is a little bit, but not so much with art for me, like picture art, as opposed to like writing art or editing or any
Mm,
other kind of artwork, because I'm so completely bad at it. Like, I'm so awful at doing drawing. Like, I can draw like stick figures, and that's probably the closest that I can do to actual art. I can make little tiny sketchings and stuff. So it's a little bit easier for me to trust somebody with art. Um, but there was that bit of fear, like, what if what comes back isn't what I want? Or like, how do I deal with that situation? How do I confront that if I end up in a situation where um like, how do I have those conversations, like, how do I uh but it ended up not mattering at all, because it came out perfect every time. Like, I would just say, this is what I want my concept to be, the color combinations, this is kind of what I want this to look like, and this is kind of the arrangement of the characters I'm looking for. And then he would just come back in 4 hours with a little draft, like, sketch mock-up. Like, does this look okay? I'm like, yeah, that looks fantastic. And it was basically like that. And so I feel very lucky that it was a perfect fit, like, perfectly. And if I mean, to the point where I'm feeling like I want a little bit more blood right here in this corner. Is that something, And then like 20 minutes later, I would have an updated draft back with it. So um, yeah, I could gush all day about the cover and about the cover artist, because it's fantastic.
yeah, it's a great cover. It has that. I think the colors you had mentioned the colors, and the colors are very eye catching. The gold and the
Yeah, one of the reasons why I picked that color, like, and this is how obsessive I get, Steve. I'll give you just one example. um, I wanted the book to stand out visually when you see it, when you're just glancing by, because it's an indie book, it's a longer book. A no-name person coming into the the industry, into the community. Um, I wanted it to visually at least be able to stand out as much as I feel the material inside deserves. Like I feel like it should at least catch an eye where somebody scrolling by will go, wait a minute, what's that? Let's go back to that. Or somebody who glances at a bookshelf, it will like pop out in their eye and they'll go, oh, okay, I'm gonna look at that real quick. And like I literally went to bookstores and took pictures of bookshelves,
hmm,
of like fantasy and sci-fi bookshelves, and then like sat there and looked at them, like kind of like did the zone out thing, looking at them and trying to see which book like caught my attention the most, even when I wasn't even paying attention to it. And that's where the kind of gold and yellow color came from, because even more than red, the yellow seemed to pop to me, like like all the books that had like a yellow on it. And I was like, okay, for my first book, I want it to be that, have that popping golden color, and that's where the rest of the cover I had no idea about. All I knew was like, okay, I want a golden yellow color in there somehow, some way. But that was like my first thought of what I wanted the cover to have on it before I even thought of any of the other material that I wanted to try to fit on there. But yeah, that's kind of where my head was at. Was like I want it to pop. I want it to like, and I had no idea at that time that I would end up with something like that was so beautiful. That was such a fantastic work of art on top of that. But yeah, that's where I was going with that.
well, yeah, it's good, some good decisions. Good thing you're obsessive because it came out really well. And you talked
True.
about your being obsessive about world building, and a lot of the reviews rave about the world building in the book. So I wondered, what's your perspective, or how do you build a world?
Well, okay, that is an incredible question and one that should be easy to answer, but of course, I'm going to make it difficult. Um, my method of world building kind of evolved as like a ping pong process, where um, sometimes I'll just write scenes and like let whatever, if I need a world building element in that sentence, I'll just like write whatever spontaneously comes to my head. And 90% of the time that ends up being what's in the book, or every once in a while I change things, but and then I'll add that later on to my like lore dictionary, like, okay, remember that this guy mentioned this god that does this, or this religion that believes in this, or this country that had this king that did this terrible thing to this country over here, remember that over here, okay. And then there are other times where I would just go on like manic lore creation, like sabbaticals, where I would just sit there in front of my camera or in front of my computer and uh, like decide to like list out all 142 kings of whatever empire this empire was, just because my brain would just decided that day that's what I was going to do. Or like when it came to the map, I sat there and would just agonize over geographical elements and like cross referencing with like real atlases and studying real historical uh, uh, wars, history, cultural migrations, things like that, and like kind of arranged and reconfigured the geography to like kind of maximize the possibility for conflict and for societies rubbing up against each other. Like I really wanted, I didn't want it to just be a square world. I noticed a lot of uh, maps that are all perfectly fine, but I noticed a lot of them are just made in a square and the world is a little square because that's what you need to fit the page. Westeros in Game of Thrones is a uh, very rectangular, perfectly 6 by 9 little shape that would fit perfectly on page. And I wanted mine to be more of a world, which means that I have a lot of empty space for ocean on the page, of course. But I wanted it to have, little areas where cultures might butt heads or places where they might fight over the territory. And the reason I did that was so that later on, when I come back to it, ideas would then bounce back off of the map after I did it.
Hmm.
Because then I'll be like, okay, I have these two characters that are going here, and they're going to meet this character from this other place. What's the tension going to be between those characters? I can then go back to the map and be like, oh, well, this landform is right next to this river, which is right next to this isthmus, and there's probably been a lot of historical fighting over trade rights and wars over who gets to control that economic area. And then I'll start bouncing back and forth, being like, okay, well, this is the closest kingdom on this side. This is the closest on that side. Maybe they both hate each other. And as it turns out, one of these characters had a father who was from one of those places. So there you go. And then suddenly I generated like a story, like a mini arc between two characters just from the way the map looked. And so like things will just kind of bounce out of that. Like, so I gravitate between being total pantser and total plotter, like with no real middle ground. Like I'll come up with something on the fly in the moment writing it, and then I'll sit down and write out, 2000 years of history for this kingdom, and then see what happens when those things bounce off each other down the road.
Wow. And you
But
mentioned
the
yeah.
yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, the main thing about world building is what you see on it's the iceberg principle. Like what you see on the page is like 5% or less of the world building I've actually done. So you can let that sink in as well when determining how obsessive I am. Also,
And so with the world and your bio it mentions that you for fun you like to just create these family lineages and history, this cultures, and all these whole worlds just for fun. So,
hmm.
how much of the world that you built for this book, how much do you plan for us readers to see as the series goes on?
Well, eventually a heck of a lot more because they're gonna and for the people who have read the book, the main characters only briefly stop by a few of the locations on that map up there behind me. There's a whole lot of that map where they have not been yet, and so but they will get there.
Mm.
So they will see a lot more. And aside from the series, the Advent Lumina series that this is in, I have some other like standalone books planned that are unrelated to this series, but that exist in the same world. So they will use the same history, the same rules, the same magic system, but they might be in a different location or in a different time even.
Mm.
Before or after the series as well, where I will focus on a lot of the areas, so I get the most out of all the different places they could possibly go, and all the different cool qualities of magic, and all the different hierarchies and family trees. Like maybe some of the big events that they mentioned in this book that had happened 500 years ago. Maybe I'll explore some of that, in real time in sort of a prequel fashion almost.
Mm.
But we'll see. But yeah, there's a lot more that will be visible at some point. This is probably the lightest one culturally speaking and family tree speaking, just because this one is kind of almost a self-contained uh epic dark adventure story, because I liken it to the way A New Hope ends in the Star Wars franchise, where it's just the characters spend a little bit of time in a few of the places that they go, and they end up the coming to a satisfying conclusion to the story that they were in, despite the fact that there's a lot more still out there. There's a lot more still going on. There's still things that haven't been tied up and villains that are out there, but it's like a satisfactory enough ending to that one story so that it stands alone. But the next books in the series will be a lot more open, with a lot more introduction of new characters, introduction of uh, you know we're going to spend a lot more time in individual places, so you're going to see a lot more of the cultures. Because I tell people that the characters in this book are kind of like tourists in a lot of ways, because they're on a hunt, or a series of hunts actually, uh, uh, to try to stop this person and to try to stop each other uh, throughout the book. So they spend a lot of time moving between places.
Mm,
And so as the series goes on, it's going to be a lot more showing some of these places more in depth, like the people who have to stay there all the time, the people who can't just leave, the people who can't just move on to some other location. So there will be a lot more of that um, uh, coming up. But I'm just obsessed with family trees and genealogies. And anytime they have those in books, history books, fantasy books, you name it, I'm a big fan. My grandmother and my great grandfather were both obsessed with doing genealogy, like the kind where you would, back before they had websites that would help you, like the kind where you would send a letter to some relative that you vaguely knew existed and ask who their parents and their children, you know what I mean? And then like wait for that info to come back, and go check records and fly to different states and check, birth records, death records, things like that. And they put together humongous, you know, genealogies going back hundreds of years. One of them that goes back almost 1,000 years,
wow.
technically. And so I'm always kind of been obsessed with that idea. So I make a lot more family trees than I can ever fit into books. So I have to choose the choice ones that are going to work the best.
So how many family trees have you created just for fun?
Oh, like in total? Oh God, it's probably hundreds. Uh, like a lot of my cultures that I created, when I created them, blessedly were just one primary family that was the dynasty of the moment. And so I was able to focus on that. Maybe they'll have a couple of, like, rich merchant families that have one or two things that you don't have to really delve deep in. But there was one culture that I created that uh, was very George R. R. Martin. It was
Mm,
very with lots of, in addition to the ruling dynasty, there were a lot of powerful houses, a la Westeros, or a la, Frank Herbert's Dune. There were multiple different powerful families, and I created a lot of family trees for them. So anyway, long story short, I will be having dramatis persona sections in each of the forthcoming books to accommodate that issue.
and, so how many do you have a plan for how long the series will be?
This particular one, I'm thinking that I can wrap it up maybe in 10 or 11.
Hmm,
I think, based on where I'm going with it. Uh, that is my hope. But it depends, because like to have a lot of characters in my books, and so my books can run a little bit long. Even though I've been told they read a lot faster than the average long book, which I think mostly is due to the fact that I am very heavy on dialogue. So I prefer to have characters um, interact with each other, or show who they are, or do uh, world building, info dumping, information. Anytime any information needs to be dispersed, I prefer to do it with dialogue if at all possible.
hmm.
Inner monologues are great and all, and whatnot, but I love dialogue. I love characters sparring with each other over things. So even though it seems long, it goes by a lot quicker than the average. Because there are some books where it's not very dialogue heavy at all. It's very sparse on the dialogue, and those ones, even books I like, that are like that, are very hard to get through to the end if there's never any back and forth, people sniping at each other. I just can't. I gotta have some of that in order for it to go by fast. But anyway,
This, this leads us in this perfect segue into a question we had on Twitter from Dan Fitzgerald. He asked, "What is the longest book you can imagine writing?"
that I can imagine writing. I have a pretty big imagination. The second book that's coming up, I'm trying very hard at the moment to keep it in the realms of the length of a Brandon Sanderson book. I'm struggling mightily to keep it, to the low 400,000 word count. um, but I do have another, like mentioned before, I had just been kind of free writing drafts of things that I wanted to have happen, and I just keep adding point of view characters and so forth. Uh, and without ever bothering to even think about whether they would fit in a print book, because at the time I was writing these drafts, I had no, intention of ever going forward you know, for reals publishing them. So I just kept writing and doing whatever. So there's going to be quite a bit of editing down at a certain point, or in some cases splitting things out to other things. But one of the drafts is very high. Um, it's close to the length of, I think, the longest ever fantasy book that was ever written as one book, that had to end up ultimately being broken into two books for publishing themselves. So I'm probably going to end up having to do that as well, break up that storyline. But I'm trying to keep it so that I can keep doing physical books that will not exceed the maximum page count of the publisher of the physical books, and that where I won't have to shrink the text down to an abnormal degree, or anything like that to make it fit. So I'm going to be looking at taking steps to do that. If I was just free writing, I could easily write a 650,000 word book, like no problem.
Wow. And
But
how many books do you have written in the series so far? That
well, draft wise, I'm up to four. So the We Break Mortals, and then three more after it. Of course, these three other ones will have some limited rewriting that's going on as well. I'm working on the second one right now. We'll have some rewriting to accommodate the uh, differences in tone and the differences in what happened in after my rewrite of the first one. So I have to, like, change it up. And I'm going to also be going through and rewriting a lot of the passages and stuff from scratch, so they will be, up to the caliber of where I'm at as a writer now, as opposed to where I was whenever I wrote that.
hmm,
Like, I think the last time when I was writing this draft, the first draft, I mean, it's not a first draft because I kind of have done some revision to it, and some polishing to it, but not like, so it's kind of, maybe it's like a second draft, I guess. But the last time I worked on this one was like 2012, 2013. Like, this is a long time ago. So I'm kind of like catching it up to where I'm at now, so it matches the quality and the tone that I'm setting with We Break More. Now, I don't want to make it sound like I'm obsessed with writing long books, because I do have a lot of the standalone books planned that are going to be much shorter, and I'm doing my darndest to try to write a novella right now too, which is very, very difficult for me. But I think I've got, uh, I think I've hit on one that I can do. I actually, I hit on one that I thought I could do, and then when I plotted it out, it ended up being a full novel like plot. So I had to go back to the drawing board, think up a new concept. But I think the new concept, I think I can do it. And plus, I figured out a way I can tie it into the overall story and characters, uh, of We Break Mortals, even though it doesn't take place during this same time period, or the same locations.
hmm.
But yeah, as far as how long could I write, if there were no restrictions, I could probably write a 1 million page book, because I like to do the Robert Jordan thing, the George R. R. Martin thing. I like to have lots of different POVs. I like to have points of view of multiple different characters, especially characters who are as different as possible from one another, or from different places. Like, for example, in We Break Immortals, one of the things I felt that I realized was missing was that I had this character who was a hunter of magic people, and then I had this guy that, uh, he he basically just drinks a lot and sword fights. He's fun with weapons, but he didn't really bring any conflict, because he was familiar with this character. And what I realized I needed was a character who was a magic user.
Hmm.
who was not the person that this character was hunting, so there would be that animosity, so that there would then be this conflict, and what will happen, like when this person who hates the hunters who come after magic users, because she's come from a place where magic users are oppressed, where children are executed if
Hmm.
they have magical skill. Um, and so she has this hatred for the people who are the hunters, and this guy who is the hunter has an absolute hatred for magic users because of his own previous traumas related to magic use. So it created this delightful tension and conflict. And it's always better to have two people that want to kill each other and then go from there. You know what I mean? Because it gives you this wealth of energy and this spark to last the whole book. So, but I like to do that. And so when I get to these other books, I kind of add more points of view. I add additional characters in different walks of life, and I like to juxtapose things too. I like to, uh, like look at one character who comes from a culture where the magic users are just ruthlessly exterminated, and then have another character from a place where magic users are exalted and elevated and welcomed, into a community where they're taught and held in high regard in their society, and like show the dichotomy there between those two factors, or things like have somebody who's a gruff old character paired with a young, spunky character, so that they can bounce off of one another. And so to a certain extent, like, um, this series will tend to be like a bunch of novellas just kind of stacked together that eventually cross over each other and through and into each other as the characters come together and meet. And they may not all come together or meet in the same book. Some characters, point of view characters, may not meet other point of view characters for like 3 books, 4 books, 5 books, and so it leaves things open for like anticipation of, oh, when is this character going to meet this character? I can't wait for that to happen, that kind of thing. So, but that's why the books in this series tend to be a little bit longer than the average, because the other books that I think about, other storylines I think about, are smaller scale.
Hmm.
They're still epic, but they're like able to be within the realm of like 1 or 2 or 3 or maybe 4 tops, you know, characters that I go into the head of. Whereas some of these sequels are going to have like 6, 7, 8, or potentially more points of view. So anyway, that's probably the longest answer to a simple, straightforward question, but that's what I got.
No, that's great. And I was wondering, as you were talking, I was wondering, do you have the end planned out?
I do and I don't. It kind of like how I have that in my world building, how I kind of have that ping pong thing going back and forth between writing all this concrete like lists and histories and places, and then also still just doing things on top of my head. I kind of do the same thing when it comes to plotting the actual stories as they're going to come out. So I know some things that I want to have happen. I don't know exactly how they're going to get to that place. I know at some point this character and this character are going to meet down the road. I have no idea how, and I don't know what's going to exactly happen when they do. But I kind of have this idea of, at some point they're going to be in this situation, where they're, So I'll have like little points like that, and some of the points are like very fixed points, like this is absolutely going to happen, like this will happen, maybe in book 6 or 7 or somewhere. I have kind of a general idea, like this event is going to happen. I don't know when or how they're going to get there, but it's going to happen. And then there are other events where it's like, I'm pretty sure I want this to happen, and then a month later I'm like, nah, actually I don't like that idea, I'm going to switch it to this. Or, oh, I came up with this other new idea, so I'm going to switch this idea. So it's still kind of like a living concept. It's not like, okay, I have the entire thing scripted out and there's going to be no deviation of any kind. It's not like that at all. It's like general touch points, general concept of where I want characters' arcs to go, things I want to have happen, uh, and a lot of room for maneuver in there. Um, and a lot of things where there's still room to even change what I have planned, because the ultimate outcome of one of the point of view characters has changed 7 times in the
Oh,
last
wow.
2 years. Because as I'm writing new stuff, I'll go back and think about this, like, "Oh, this reminds me of how I want this character to end. Maybe something will change up because of what I wrote now," and I'll go back and affect it. So, and I've heard that a lot of authors are kind of like that, where they kind of like, I have some key ideas. I don't know exactly how it's going to go. I'm going to find out. Part of the fun is finding out how those characters meet, finding out how those events come to have happen. So, but yeah, so I know how it's sort of going to end, and I know sort of the events that are going to happen in it. I'm not flying blind. Let me put it that way. I know things for sure that I've thought out, that I know it for a fact are going to happen 9 books from now.
Mm,
So I'm not flying in space, just kind of like punching around, trying to find a way out. But at the same time, it's wide open. Like, I'm not 100% sure who lives and who dies in every case at this point, that kind of thing. But based on what people tell me, they expect a lot of people to die over the course of this series. I tend to be a rather bloodthirsty author when it comes to that. So.
mm. So, how do you make a character death? How do you make a death impactful without it being just violence or death for death's sake?
Impactful. It's for me. It's the emotional connection, and oftentimes, like, because I like to have a lot of named characters. Like, the a lot of people will have, okay, I have my main character, or maybe two main characters, and then I have like five side characters that are their sidekicks, friends, mentors, what have you, and then a bunch of C squad people out here who may not even have names. They'll just be like the other guard, guard
Yeah.
number three, you know, things like that. And it's a lot easier, like, just taking the step of naming someone humanizes them to a significant degree.
Mm,
And so I like to do that even with bit characters that are introduced for just a chapter or just for a page in some cases. Like, I like to have that element in there just to kind of remind the reader that this is a person. This isn't a cardboard cutout stick figure that somebody's going to knock over at some point. This is a person. And I like to lean on that, so that to help it get to that point where if they are a character who dies, they they already have humanized this person in their eyes. Um, and I feel like there has to be an emotional component to a character dying. It can't just be, this character fought valiantly to do this and they didn't make it, or they did succeed but they died in the process. It can't just be that. It has to be why they tried so hard, why they had to do this. Um, how does it feel to them that they know that they made it? How does it feel to the people watching them die that they know that they made it? Or not, when they died. It has to be some kind of emotional connection,
mm,
and it's there's no hard and fast rule for how to do that. um, some characters need build up for a long amount of time, um, to get to a place where a reader can love that character. And then there's some characters where you can just feel who that character is. Like, I know that character. I've been that character, after just a couple pages. They're like, I've been in this situation before. Maybe not, you haven't been like trying to stop somebody from being murdered by a maniacal, sorcerer, but maybe you've been in a situation where you had to go pick up your drunk manic friend who's been on a bender and is going crazy at a party house, and you have to try to drag him out of there before the cops come to get him. Little things like that that might translate loosely into what you're seeing in the story you're reading, even if the specifics of it are not the same. You can sort of feel yourself in that situation. You can feel yourself in a situation where you tried so hard and you were so sure that you got it right and you didn't. and you fail. And you've been in that, everybody's been in that situation before, and it's just a matter of pointing that out. Like, this character, not just saying that this character tried and failed, just showing that character how much they wanted to succeed, how sure they were that they were going to, and how devastated they are that they're not going to succeed, whether they're the one who dies or whether they're the cause of someone else's death or all of the above. You need to see that, you need to feel the feeling of the death, not just check a box that somebody died here or somebody lived there. Um, but yeah, I mean, I could go on for a long time talking about little tips and tricks for things like that. But the key is to humanize people, and then to somehow grab that emotional connection to them as a reader reading the situation, so they can feel sympathy in that situation.
Hmm. And when you choose character names, how do you choose character names for even?
Oh, character names. That's one of my world building things, Steve. There are some days where I just go on world building benders where I'll spend a whole weekend just sitting, like, kind of like half watching TV, half listening to music, and then just like trying to write out character names that sound good. Like, I'll go crazy. I'll go through like the index at the back of like science books and like read each line and see what syllable combinations jump out at me, and then modify it. Um, but I really love creating character names. And I couldn't tell you what it is about each character name that I like or don't like, but I feel like character names really make the character to a certain extent. Like, the way that a character's name sounds to me makes me think of ways their personality might be.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that's a thing that's real or if that's just a thing that I do. Um, because I don't know if you know, but I have synesthesia, where I when I look at like letters, numbers, they have like colors that
Hmm.
are associated with them. Just concrete in my head, they're just always been that way since birth. Um, like, to the point where when I see numbers or letters that are in a different color paint on the side of a building than what that number should be, I get, angry
Hmm.
about it. So I don't know if it's like related to that, the sound or the look of the name creating that. I don't know if that's the same kind of feature or if that's just some separate mental mechanism I do. But I like to take lists of names and just be like, okay, this group of names is going to be for this set of characters in this part of the world or for this book or whatever. And then a lot of the times I'll agonize over like the main character names, but the other characters, I'll just throw a name at that character and then see what that character name makes me think of. Like, does it sound like a miserly old man shaking his cane? Does it sound like a nice, happy old man who loves, gathering his grandchildren around and, giving money to the poor, stuff like that? Does it make me think of like a suspicious person or a kind person or a snarky person? Like, what kind of things come up out of just hearing the name? So I definitely get a lot out of naming characters. I don't know if I have like a rule for how I name them. I just grab what fits, or what seems to fit. But a lot of time the name then ends up dictating what the character is going to be like.
Hmm.
Because there are just some character names that I have that I'm like, that guy is up to something. I just see that name that I created. I don't have a character for this name, but I look at that name and I say, whoever that is, eventually he's up to something.
Hmm.
So I just kind of get these little vibes from the names. But it's another one of those things where it's like a where I'll create like long lists of names, and then when I'm writing a book or working on a chapter and I need a new character, I'll just go, "Oh, I need a new character." I'll go to the name thing, look down. Ooh, that one's good. Let's take that one.
Hmm.
I do try to save some of the ones that sound really really good. I don't like to waste like awesome sounding names. I do have a bank of awesome sounding names for big characters from other books or later in the series. So I don't want to just burn through all of those. I don't want to dump all my best names, in the first two books and then just have nothing left but crap names. The same way with ending a book, you have to be careful that you make the stakes really high, but not so high that like everything that comes after is like, well, that wasn't as big a deal as what you already did in the first book. I mean, come on, you know, you have to. One of the things about writing a series is you have to like escalate your your stakes, um, or at least keep your stakes about the same. If it's a different villain or different sets of villains in different situations, you at least have to keep the stakes on the same level,
Hmm.
but hopefully, trending upward as the series goes on. You don't want to do your best, amazing, thing right off the bat, and then just be scratching your head like, where to go from here. I'm the same with names, with character names too.
How many character names are on your list of names that you've
Oh,
saved?
it's probably thousands. I mean, it's like I already have banks of names set out for characters from books that I'm probably not going to start writing until next year. A lot of those character names are in family trees or hierarchies or of the different kingdoms and empires and things like that, that are already earmarked for those. Um, and for some of the standalone books, like I already have like lists of all the names of characters for who and who that they're going to be in those books, all kind of earmarked out, even though I haven't worked on them. And then I just have a bank of whoever the heck is left. But in total, it's like a lot. And because I like to put names out to everything. I don't want to just say, oh, yeah, that reminds me of the one time that one emperor who is friends with a guy did a thing. Like, I like to have the names for those things, so you can be like, the things that we take for granted in our world, like, oh, I'm going to go to the Lincoln Memorial and look at this thing, and then I'm going to drive over here to this thing that's named after somebody. Names that we all know.
Mm.
Like in fantasy, you don't have that, because the things that are there are all named for people that you don't know. You don't have any context at all. So I have to have throwaway names for like the if they're gonna meet at a place. It sounds silly to just say, hey, let's go meet at the place next to the thing by the whoosy what's it's, like you like. So even if it's just a name for a thing in one paragraph just to go meet at, just to make it feel real. Like I like to have names for that. Where it's needed. You don't always need a name for everything, but I like to have names available to do that kind of stuff
Hmm. Well, that's quite a few names. Um,
with. Some of them never make it anywhere. Some of them never make it off the drawing board. Some of them are just there. I'm like, they seemed cool at the time, but they just get passed over.
mm.
Like kids getting picked for kickball teams in elementary school. Some of the names just, no, not you, next, just keep going down. I was passed over a lot in kickball, you may have figured out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's kind of a lot. It's uh, I have a lot of manias when it comes to creating world building elements. I just kind of, you know I have my moments.
It sounds like, yeah. It's great though. And I did read that you were raised on a steady diet of books, movies, comics, anime, and 8-bit Nintendo games. Which of those stand out to you now as an adult?
As far as the thing that I still like to do.
Or that just it had the biggest impact on you?
Impact wise, well, definitely books. I mean, definitely read. I was always into sci-fi and fantasy. I mean, I read a heck of a lot of sci-fi. I just don't like to write sci-fi. It's just not my jam for writing.
Hmm.
But very early on, I was picking up, Isaac Asimov's Foundation, Lord of the Rings. I was big into the Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms series, the old Dungeons and Dragons related worlds, which is hugely inspiring my world building. Like I'm a big fan of um, having a huge world where a lot of different stories are happening. Maybe not all of them are even in any way related to one another, but they all happen in the same world. and that's kind of that definitely has inspired where I want to go as far as doing my main series and then having standalones and novellas and things like that. Um, that whole kind of franchise feel to it, like an expanded universe style. Except I guess I'm the one in charge of the expanded universe, so I have a lot of work ahead of me, I guess. But that definitely, those things definitely inspired me. I was always fascinated by epic stuff. Like
Mm.
I was always big into series of books from very early on, and I don't know why. It's just that's the way it was. And I was obsessed with comic books too. It was the late '80s, early '90s. There was a big comic book boom.
Right.
Um, where comic books got that was the first moment where comic books started to get really super interesting because it was sort of near the tail end of the comic book code, the keep everything G rated for the most
Mm.
part comic book code, where interesting things started to come out like Watchmen. um, One of my favorite old time ones from Marvel was Squadron Supreme,
Yeah.
because that had some really went into some gray area stuff where like the villains ended up being indistinguishable from the good character. Like that was a fascinating one where some of the good guys on they're they it was kind of like a play on the Avengers to a certain extent because they're different characters who are on a team that stop villains and try to stop crime, and then they ended up deciding, well, the best what's going to happen when we die and there's no more superheroes. We need to change the human people, the regular people, so that they're all nice to each other all the time. So they're the good scientists. Their old man version of a Tony Stark character created a device that would uh, basically brainalize people into being like not themselves, just being a super nice person, reprogramming them to never have any kind of conflict or whatever. And then a bunch of the characters from that kind of team uh, quit over that because they thought that's not ethical. We're changing who people are against their will, uh, and it ended up like those characters ended up teaming up with villain characters, and then I mean, it blew my mind when I was like 9 years old reading this because it was the concepts were like light years away from what I expected comic books to be, and I was just like, boom, immediately into it. I mean, even like the generic comics, like GI Joe comics in the late '80s, early '90s, were crazy. Like the characters were dying. There was no parachutes coming out of the helicopters when all these complicated themes of like government corruption and military being used and misused and uh, uh, that you would never have known existed from the how corny the TV shows and the action figures and all that stuff was. Like it was really a good time for interesting material coming out of the comic book world. So that was a big thing too. And anime also obviously influenced me, but at the time there was very little anime that existed. When I first started, like the that was around the time when we first got like Akira, Ninja Scroll, Vampire Hunter D, things like that. There wasn't a lot of material existing. Like there was some Gundam related stuff, but there was not as much around. So every little piece I could get my hands on became like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. So, um, and I loved the format of storytelling and how they absolutely would go into tragedy. They were
Mm.
not, and I was like, this is a cartoon, and they are not afraid to go all in on tragedy. Like this is amazing. I was a weird kid, so, but uh, but yeah, all of those things influenced me definitely. And then the 8-bit Nintendo games, they didn't really influence how I do anything, but I still play them. Like I don't play the first person shooter games. I mean, I have, but I'm not like going out and getting them. I have like a modded Nintendo system, so I can just still play the old 8-bit games or 16-bit games. The games are so complex and amazing now that they're almost like movies. So I've become more of a watcher of other people playing video games than I have an actual, video game head myself.
Hmm. I wonder if the image boom in the was it the early '90s, I guess, the comics, the way that
Image was, yeah, that's right around the time when Image came out. They had a number of good ones as well.
yeah, it makes me wonder if that did that influence you pursuing self-publishing?
Um, well, I definitely knew it was of that as being a thing at the time. And as I said, I did do the kind of some vanity things on KDP, for instance. But pardon me, sorry about that. But the I never really thought of it as a real thing until I figured out that there were services that would do print books because it just didn't feel real. Self-publishing just didn't feel real to me if it was just ebooks. It felt half done
Mm.
unless I could hold something in my hand. And so it was really towards just the last, I don't know, however long, however many years, where services came out that were more than just a print on demand, and then 6 weeks later you can get a book. Things like the KDB print and the Ingram Spark really. When I heard about those, I was like, "Oh, wait a minute! Maybe this is a thing now that I can do." Let's take another look at this because I was a really big deal to me, and probably a lot of authors will sympathize with this. It was a big deal to hold my own book in my own hands. Like it was a big deal. um, it was a giddy emotional moment to have that happen. And before that that was a thing that was possible, I couldn't get as excited, you know what I mean, if I was just doing ebooks as I could with this. So
So I think what you're saying is that you prefer physical media over digital media.
here's the thing. I love my Kindle, man. I will take that thing everywhere. um, when I was little, I used to carry around a book bag that had like 10 different books in it everywhere. If we went to visit family for Christmas, I brought that thing with me because I had to like read for a significant portion of time where I was exposed to relatives. Um, uh, in general, if I had to, and as a teenager in high school, like my backpack had maybe like this much actual school books in it, and then like this much books that I actually wanted to read, like fantasy books, are role playing modules, source books for like video games or sci-fi worlds and things like that. Um, and I always had all that with me up until I was an adult in my 20s. I would still bring a bag of books with me in my trunk if I went to the bar. It could, just in case. Like, what if I need to read something? What if I'm horrifically bored? I have a problem with boredom. So, like, what if I'm horrifically bored? And when I'm bored and I have to wait somewhere, I get very irritable. I'm a terrible person to be around. I'm the kind of person who's tapping my foot. I'm checking my non-existent watch, like when is this going to be over? Can I get out of here? But if I have a book in my hand, I can calm down. I can relax. I can be like, oh, okay, I have this. I can flip this open. Okay, everything's going to be fine. And the invention of the Kindle like saved my spine because I didn't have to carry these giant bags of books. I could carry hundreds of my books with me at all times. So I still read books um, on Kindle. So I will buy a person's book on Amazon and then have it on my Kindle or iBooks or whatever. I do still have to have physical books, so I will probably get that person's book again in a physical form. Financially, it's a terrible method of handling things, but it's what I ended up doing. But for me personally, I had to know that it was real. I had to feel it,
Mhm.
that my own book was real, to get super excited about. But I definitely love my Kindle. It's my favorite thing because my eyes get tired really easily. So it's really good to have something that's not backlit,
Mhm.
but that still has, and it's not very heavy, but still has 1,000 books on it. So that's like my reader's dream come true was that invention.
Yeah,
Like
and
more important than television to me.
yeah, it's amazing that this little thing can carry so many books on it. It's
It's
ridiculous.
wild. It's just wild.
It's
I mean,
ridiculous.
I wrote my first ever story when I was like, I don't know, 9 or 10 on an Apple II GS computer that had a 4 megabyte hard drive.
Had a hard drive though. That's good.
A 4 megabyte hard drive. Like, I don't even know if my book is smaller than 4 megabytes. But anyway,
Mhm.
yeah, technology just is just crazy. Anyway,
Yeah, it's
I don't want to
wild.
get sidetracked on a let's see how old, how much I can date myself, how old that I can expose myself to be. Let's get away from that before I start to turn to dust
Yeah,
on the
I think
screen.
like, my first computer didn't have a hard drive. It was just inserting discs over and over again. It was like 5 discs.
Oh, doing.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember the floppy disks.
it was quite a bit ago. And in addition to being a writer and author, you're also a reviewer for Before We Go blog. So what is your approach to reviewing books now that you've been through this whole experience?
Reviewing, I like to keep things short and sweet. I haven't reviewed anything since my book came out because I've been going through this roller coaster of health issues since then. But my preferred method is to like nail down like the short and sweet distillation of what the book meant to me. I don't tend to do like full like okay chapter by chapter let's talk about how cool this was or in-depth things. I like to like try to get to the essence of what the book made me feel, what its tone was like, what its feel was like, what I liked the best about it, what if anything I didn't like about it, and what maybe a little bit synopsis is about the key characters or events or things like that. But I like the short and sweet method, uh,
Mm.
uh, just for my own way I write, which is bizarre because that's not the way I go with writing actual books. So maybe this is my brain's way of keeping balance in the universe or something. So
So I have another question for you. So what is a hobby or a thing that you're excited to try, but when you tried it, you did not enjoy it?
a hobby that I thought would be exciting. Oh well, you definitely the video games. Modern video games are definitely one of those. The first-person shooter games were something that I was like, "This is perfect. This is what me and my friends playing in the trees in the backyards of our houses. This is awesome. I'm ready to go." And then like it just kind of my interest in it kind of just petered out to a
Mm,
certain degree. Like it just they all started to take on each other. They all just kind of started to blend together, with very rare exceptions. There are some that are exceptional, like storytelling. They're almost like films. Some of these games, but I couldn't get into it because it would either drag me in too much and I would just overindulge in it, or I just couldn't get into it at all. It would be one or the other. But that was something I never could get into.
hmm,
But yeah, hobby wise now, um, I haven't I haven't been too much into any other real hobbies. Since my hobby is now writing and building things for my cats to sit on. Are basically my two purposes in life at this point that I've devolved to. All my extra when my son was born, all my extra time other than for those two things, and even for those two things, has kind of gone out the window. But I find ways to make time for that. But other things. I mean, historically speaking, I've gone through phases like in between writing, like because I told you how I would write and then put down the writing for like 6 months or a year or more. Like I would just have these breaks over the years. Like there was a time where I was obsessed with playing basketball
hmm,
for like almost a whole year. Like, and I got really good at it and tried out for the team. This is back when I was in high school. I tried out for the team, was doing really good, and suffered a really bad injury, like a really bad muscle tear, um, just in time because it was just in time for me to realize that I didn't really want to play basketball for any reason. So then, for a while I was in a rock band. I play guitar, um, and I still do. But for a while, I was obsessed with being in that band, writing music, going to jam sessions. Um, I used to be in a sword fighting group, like a rogue sword fighting group, where we would go. Uh, Fight with heavy rapiers. We would take over parking garages in the middle of the night, like the multi-story ones,
yeah.
and then just go to town. And we would do trainings, and then we would do bouts against each other. We would have melees and other things. We would even have castle battles where we would have fights on the steps of the stairwells of the parking garages. I mean, we must have looked like lunatics to people. Um, but we would dress in all black, and we had these custom made brass skull cod pieces that we would wear.
Right.
It was quite a thing that we'd go into, and then we would go show up at the places where people would gather, like the SCA people, the people who dress up like kings and lords and ladies and have like fake night battles in armor. Every other Wednesday they would go out to a park and do stuff. We would show up there and have bouts with other people and things like that. So for a while I was, and I miss that the most probably, but there's just no time to do that with everything else that is going on at this point. So I'm more of a retired sword fighter at this point. But we got pretty good at it there, and some of my friends still do it. One of my really good friends from high school that was in that sword fighting group, he actually founded a uh, historical swordsmanship training, like a European martial arts training group here where I live. His name's Richard Marsden. He has written books about Polish saber fighting, and has been he's semi famous for some YouTube videos of him doing sword fight sparring with some people. But yeah, he was part of our ragtag group
Hmm.
of sword fighters back then. But I'm glad I got to bring up the brass skull cod pieces. Last time I was talking to somebody about this, I forgot that, and I was kicking myself afterward because that was a fantastic world building detail for that story
Wow.
that I
Yeah.
forgot. But now at this point everything is just absorbed into writing, like because all of my hobbies kind of have converged at this point. Like everything I take in, media, film, movies, TV shows, books, anime, comic books, even music I listen to. Like music sparks ideas for events. Like I was just listening to a song the other day that I don't even, I'm big about owning music and having playlists and things of my own. I don't like to do Spotify, but I just like heard a song randomly on the radio that I don't even haven't even listened to in 20 years, and it like sparked this idea for something that's going to happen in one of my books. So everything kind of like revolves around the storytelling thing at this point. So it's kind of boxed out a lot of the other stuff that I used to do.
Hmm. And you had mentioned a little bit, but I had heard a rumor. I'm not sure if it's true that you're often surrounded by cats. Is that
It
true?
is it is almost an entirely. I mean, we're frankly lucky right now that it is during a cat nap time, but there is a cat. Uh, I'm going to try to be gentle here. There she is.
Yep.
There she is.
So it's
That's the
true.
culprit that usually tries to cause drama when I'm on the phone or on a video chat. She routinely will not leave me alone. She will try to climb on me and stuff like that. So we're very lucky or unlucky, depending on what kind of content you wanted to see today in this video. But she is taking a nice little nap right now. So, but
Hmm.
yeah, we have a lot of cats here. We started off with uh, just two when we got our house here. We found out there was a huge stray cat problem in the neighborhood,
Hmm.
and we found this out by when a litter of kittens just kind of like plumped its way out of somebody's backyard into the side yard of our house, and we were like, so we immediately tried to like, you know, catch them and get them adopted out. We ended up keeping one who became one of our cats. He's enormous. He's like 18 pounds. He is a huge
Wow.
cat. He's definitely part Maine Coon, and I think the whole lineage of the cats that were strays in our area were that way. But we got him, and then his mom cat's sister cat had a litter, and then so we had to like try to uh, uh, rescue and adopt them out. We went through this whole saga of doing trap neuter release and trap neuter and adopt with a bunch of cats. One of the last litters of the last cats that we got before we got them fixed, actually, she adopted us. She just like came into our house and just decided to be our pet, and then just a bunch of the others we adopted out or fixed out, and we kind of solved the problem because there haven't really been any other cats in our neighborhood. We now have our interior house. We have 4 cats, and then we have 2 outside cats.
Hmm.
It used to be 4 interior and like 6 outside cats, but some of those got adopted out and whatnot. So we're kind of at a happy little equilibrium and everything. But I have a tendency to like fuss very hard over them and build them elaborate, makeshift shelters of various types, and spend exactly too much money on getting things for them to make their lives more comfortable. So but it's better to spend my energy there than doing that than just being angry all the time. I have 2 places I can direct my energy: being angry about the way the world is, and then taking care of cats. And so I do that.
Gotta turn lemons into lemonade.
Correct. And then I channel the rest of my anger into writing so that I can write things, but have the ending the way I want to instead of the way the world tends to have things end, usually in real life. I like to, as terrible as I am to my characters along the way. In the end, I do like to have pretty awesome catharsis for characters. So it's not always tragedy. Unfortunately, to set things up in books, you have to have a lot of tragedy up front because you have to have the villains that you want people to hate for a
Mm.
long time, so that when you get to the point where they get their comeuppance, you're like, yes, finally, we made it. So, but yeah, that's one of the reasons that I like to tell stories is that I like to take things or the type of people that I'm angry about in real life and put them on paper in a way that they can get what's coming to them in a way that society does not provide us that outlet.
It sounds like a healthy outlet.
but uh but yeah, so that's I mean I like to say that it's normal, but I'm pretty obsessed with our cats. So I'm pretty much a cat whisperer when we're over at people's houses and there are cats around. You know, I tend to be accepted in the cat community pretty well.
So I just have a couple of fun questions to finish out my
Okay,
conversation.
are we at the end already? Did I already talk for like 7 hours?
No, 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 you're fine.
I,
No,
I
it's
rattle on so much, so I have no idea to tell whether we've been talking for 5 minutes or like 50 minutes.
no, it's great because whenever I form questions, I hope for long answers. So
Oh,
it's
good. Okay. Well, you came to the right place today. So.
no, I love the long answers because I always worry about thinking yes or no, and then asking
Oh
the wrong.
God, yeah, yeah. I'm pretty long winded. Once I get started talking, I can keep going for this is me being guarded and trying to like trim my answers. Yeah, I'm one of those people that could talk your ear off all night if you don't stop me. So.
No, yeah, that's as I've been doing this interview stuff, it's the one thing I'm always fearful of with people I haven't talked to before is I hope there's long answers because otherwise it's like a sense of panic sets in, and then
Yeah. I mean, it's some people are quiet people. Some people are yes or no answer people, or short answer people. So I can see how that would be tough as an interviewer,
yeah,
for sure. So
I've been pretty lucky. It hasn't really happened yet, but it's
I
always
wonder I wonder if in the writer community it's a higher likelihood of having longer winded answers
it
just
seems like
because of the nature of the personality type you have to be a writer.
yeah, I think it's just inherently something that writers, the creative people have a
Hmm.
lot, have a lot of ideas, and so
Right.
I'm fortunate in that sense.
Yeah, yeah. There's not a lot of fantasy authors that are like Charles Bukowski types who are like I don't want to be here in this interview. What am I even doing here? There's not a lot of fantasy authors that I know are absolutely down to talk all day and night about fantasy, about books, about the process of writing, the
Mhm.
trials and tribulations of writing. So yeah, it's we tend to go on.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's all good stuff. So no, I appreciate the long answers. It's a good thing. So don't
Okay.
feel.
Okay.
But the last few questions I have are so recently I spoke with author Halo Scott, and we discussed jelly beans. So Halo likes to eat jelly beans all at once, just a handful, and throws them all in the mouth. I like to pick out flavors and eat them one by one, different flavors at a time.
It
What
is
is
very funny that you ask this question right now because I am the kind of person who, like a week ago, went and individually selected individual flavors of Jelly Belly jelly beans by the bag and had them deliver my 8 favorite flavors of Jelly Belly jelly beans. I think I tweeted about this, but like, uh, because I thought it's funny. But yeah, I am the kind of person who likes to pick out the flavors that I like, or maybe I'll have a couple different flavors if the flavors go together. Um, but I very much am like I'm in for the flavor that I want at this moment. Give me that flavor. I don't want the mix and match. But that is actually very funny because I've never actually gone out and bought like jelly beans before. Like it's not the kind of, hey man, have you when was the last time you got some jelly beans? It's not a question that you run into a lot in normal life. Um, so it wasn't even a thing that occurred to me to do until like last week. I was like, I haven't had jelly beans in a while. I kind of feel like I should have some jelly beans. And then I found out you could get the individual flavors, and I'm like, score, I'm doing it. So I'm very much the one flavor guy. I like to have more than I'm not one of those people that can eat one at a time though. So I know some people like to eat one bean at a time. I like to have like a handful of jelly beans, but all the same flavor at the same time.
what are your favorite flavors?
Oh, with the jelly bellies, I love the chocolate, the coconuts, uh, the bubblegum flavor, the watermelon flavor, things like that.
Hmm, good mix. Do you like the black licorice flavor?
Actually, I do.
Hmm,
It was the something that I hated as a kid. I always picked around the
okay.
black licorice flavored stuff as a kid. And when we went to see movies, I would always get red licorice, never black licorice. I hated black licorice. Um, but as an adult, I've developed an affection for uh, black licorice flavored jelly beans. So now I'm okay with them. They're not like my favorite flavor of all time, but if I see one, I'm like, oh yeah, I will definitely go for that if I need to.
I like the black licorice flavors now. I'm the same way. I didn't really like them earlier, but I'm not the biggest fan. But like you said, if they're there, then I'll eat them. The second question is, do you have a favorite family recipe?
Favorite family recipe? Well, from childhood, my favorite recipe that my mom made was this like stroganoff, like beef stroganoff thing. We called it hamburger mush because we did, that was what our little kid brains called it. But it was like the single best stroganoff ever that I've ever had in the world. Um, Fast forward to today, like all of like my top 10 or 20 favorite foods are just recipes my wife makes. She is superbly skilled uh, 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 at cooking anything, and not just like just cooking, but like when there are certain foods that I don't like for instance, I wasn't a big fan of like roasts or pork chops as an example. I just was not a big fan of those. She like would actually seek out different methods and create concoctions that were new versions or variations of that are now some of my favorite meals of all time. So like she goes out. I'm very blessed in this way. She goes out of her way to like not just like scratch things off a list. She will go out of her way to like take that thing that I don't like and make it something that I like. So, um, so yeah, so like nowadays I don't have to go out to eat all that often. Like I still do sometimes, but I don't feel compelled to the way I used to when I was in my 20s and my kitchen was just made up of like, ham sandwiches and Oreo cookies. Um, now, did I strike a nerve there? Now I have all these amazing recipes. I mean, we're talking awesome like bruschetta chicken, Tuscan chicken. She makes Korean beef. All these different types of food that are just phenomenal, like fish taco, like everything across the board, all different types, variations, genres of food.
Wow.
So I couldn't. I don't think I could choose just one because there's so many good ones now.
Yeah.
But But in my 20s, there was nothing, nothing. I mean, it was like my fridge had more condiments in it than actual food for most of my 20s, and so I'm way better off now.
Sounds about right. Yeah. So if the zombie apocalypse happened today, what would be your weapon of choice?
What would be weapon of choice? I assume you want like a interesting weapon because the natural thing is probably a firearm or other distance weapon. Um, what would I use? Hmm.
Your book.
I think I would probably go with the sledgehammer.
Hmm.
I think I would go with sledgehammer. I think I would go with a bludgeoning tool. I've seen too many zombie uh, uh, films and TV shows where they use the edged weapon
Mhm.
to take out the brain. I'm assuming this the you take out the brain kind of zombie. Where the edged weapon then gets stuck in the skull, and then they are disarmed. And I don't think I would have that problem with a sledgehammer.
Hmm. Maybe a good mace.
Yeah, a mace would also probably work. I happen to have a sledgehammer. I don't have a well. You know what? I do have a mace. Shit. I take that back. My brother gave me a mace for Christmas last year, so I do have a mace. So yes, I could also use the mace.
There you go. You're all set.
But I feel like the sledgehammer might have more punching power because it's a two-hander. The mace I have is a one-handed mace.
Hmm.
But yeah, because I mean, how many hundreds of times have you seen somebody with their knife or their trusty katana and they stick the zombie and then immediately it gets wedged in there, and then the other zombies are coming closer and closer and the camera goes back and forth, back and forth. Oh, is he going to get it out in time? I don't want to experience that pitfall.
So the next question is, what was your first job?
Oh, my first job was bag boy at a grocery store when I was like, I don't know, 14, 15, whenever it was. Um, but yeah, I was a bag boy at the grocery store. Uh, and then I moved up from there to being a stalker at a drugstore. Like I went through this whole uh, retail saga where I just slowly worked my way up from job to job at different places. But yeah, my first ever job was literally the most generic American kid job you could get, bag boy at a grocery store.
What did you learn from that experience?
I learned that being good at Tetris makes you a good bag boy. I will say this: I was not that asshole who would just like throw whatever into your bags. Like I was that dude that was like carefully like I would like scan ahead at the other stuff that was coming down the mat from the cashier person, and I would like game plan in my head 3 moves ahead where I was gonna which bag I was gonna put which item in, and like yeah, I went all out on strategy for that. I don't know if that was a survival mechanism to survive boredom, or if that was just I'm just that cool of a brainiac person. It's one of those two things. But yeah, I did take it seriously. I wasn't just like half-assing it or sitting around. But yeah, but still, it was just bagging groceries, so I can't pretend like I'm a rocket scientist or anything for sure.
Well, you have to take pride in what you do, no matter what it is, right? So that's a good
Yeah,
thing.
I definitely do that. Yeah, that is one of my hallmarks. Whatever job I'm doing, I at least try to do a decent job.
Decent job. So a question that I like to ask every guest, just so I can improve my questions and the format,
I
right?
should have I should have watched the last video to the end. What was the last question? I should have known this.
The last question is: was there a question that, if roles were reversed and you were in my position, was there a question that you would have asked that I did not ask?
Heck, I don't know. I think you touched on everything, man. Um, I'm a terrible interviewer, so I don't know if I would. um, I don't know. Maybe just a catch-all type question, like what are other interests or other. like just looking around because I'm in my library right now. Like maybe like what else do you read besides fantasy, or is fantasy all you read? Because I read a lot of stuff that's not fantasy too. That's the only thing I can think of, just kind of glancing around. Uh, but yeah, I didn't feel like any question was missed with that one, that particular one missing. But
So what else do you like to read other than
no,
fantasy?
I like that turnaround. That's awesome. Well, I excessively read history books.
Mm,
Um, I love reading about history. I'm kind of like a connoisseur of history books. Like I hate the ones that read like dictionary entries or encyclopedias. I like the ones that kind of like try to put you there into the events that were occurring and kind of make you feel like what things were like and things like that.
mm,
But I love reading history, and I get a lot of inspiration from history because in a lot of ways, reality is wilder than fiction in a lot of ways. Um, I get a lot of ideas for like culture clashing, coups, and wars and other political intrigues and things like that from actual history because there's been some very very insane things that have happened. But I definitely love reading history. But I also spend a lot of time reading science books, like books about like physics, astrophysics, things about the universe and how things work. And I because that's probably the inspiration for my magic system because a lot of it is based on manipulating uh, uh, like basically like the equivalent of manipulating a physics equation in real time and having it affect the way things are.
yeah,
Like like the simple version is like if you threw a ball at me and I could mentally change the way that acceleration was affected by gravity or change the mass of that ball to like zero or change it to 1,000 pounds at the drop of a hat. That's kind of like what my magic system is based around. Not the magic tracking part, that's a whole separate thing, but like the actual magic system itself is kind of physics based to a certain extent. So it's kind of like that's probably because I have a penchant for looking at cool equations and figuring out how things work and how changing one thing can affect the result of something else. So I have a
mm,
lot. I'm kind of all over the place with reading, to be honest with you. Like I read like travel memoirs. I read like music, auto, biographies of like musicians. Like I tend to go all over the place. With that I've read House of Leaves, which you recently did a video on, which is I basically agreed with literally everything you said about it. But I like weird books like that as well.
mm,
I have other weird book recs that I could probably give you if I could remember the names off the top of my head, which I can't right now. If
mm.
I dig around here enough, I could probably find some that are equivalent, uh, equivalent riddleness as the enigma that is House of Leaves, that kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
But
Oh,
yeah, I like a lot of nonfiction as well as fiction for sure. And then
mm,
comic books too. I have so many anthologies of I've basically repurchased my entire childhood of comics in those big omnibus anthology, hardcover volumes. So I thumb through those occasionally as well.
mm. Yeah, I've done the same. I went all digital with all my comic books, and then I regretted it like 2 years later.
Mhm. I did go digital with quite a few. I do have a lot of them backed up that I got when I was using one source. But then the source that I used to purchase them on stopped working the same way. So I kind of got out of the habit of doing it because it went from a page to page Zoom thing to like it would only go from pane to pane.
Yeah.
Like you didn't have the choice of going. Because I'm one of those people who likes because I read very small writing, so I don't mind seeing a full comic book page on my iPhone or something like that. And I like to see it and then pinch and zoom. You know what I mean? Like I don't like to like have it force feed me into the paint because I like to see the way it looks on the page when I'm reading a comic book. But So when they made that switch, I kind of got out of the habit of getting the digital ones, but I kept right on going with the physical ones. So I pretty much have them all over again.
That that change was really bothered me too because there's an art form in how you structure the pages and the panels and the panes. It's like in Watchmen. If you didn't see the entire page, you would miss out on so much of that experience because it's so organized.
Exactly, exactly, and especially for the comics that I was interested in were the ones in the late '80s, early '90s. They really went all in on that back
Yeah,
then. I have seen some more recent ones that do a lot of that as well, that are really fantastic that have just come out in the last like 6 or 7 years. Um, but back then they were really into it. Like they were really focused on that kind of thing. And so like yeah, well, like you were saying, it kind of bummed me out
yeah.
when they made that change. I don't mind making that an option, but I'm one of those people who's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you want to add a new amenity, by all means, but stop trying to take away the thing that's always worked for me that I have never complained about. So
Yeah, exactly. Try to make things too simple and make things harder.
correct. Yeah, that is a huge thing in technology of all forms. I spend more time trying to make their simple versions be as easy as the version that was allegedly complex that it was replacing that
Yeah.
used to have I have no used to have no problems with. So that is a recurring theme in life at this point.
Funny how that works. Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
So, if people want to connect with you, where's the best place to find you to say hello and tell you how great your book is?
Oh, yes. Well, if you're looking for information about things, my website, thomashowardriley.com, has all the relevant links for reviews, some uh, blog posts I've written, links to purchase the book, or where you can view the infamous prologue, uh, which is quite a contentious topic. But so far, pretty universally, people have said that they really enjoy my prologue.
Hmm.
So yeah, you can go see it there. Uh, and also I put in a lot of like extra little things which I'm slowly but surely adding to, little extra things outside the books that are just like fun little things and listicles and whatnot from there. Also, you can find me on Twitter. I am at Ornithopteryx on Twitter, and I'm always on there to greater or lesser degree. Um, I'm trying to get back to the volume that I was in over the past year before I fell ill. So slowly but surely, I'm making my way back there to being as active on social media as I was before.
Yeah, it can be time consuming. Definitely, social media can.
It does. It every little bit adds up. It seems like it's just going to be one little thing, but there you go. Before you know it, you've been scrolling through things, and it's been an hour, and you have no idea where the time went.
Yeah, they're good at their algorithms for sure. They're good at.
Yes, there's no doubt of that. So, but yeah, but I am on there. I post things. I react to things. I'm always fine with people who want to talk about the book or yell at me about when's the next book coming out. Because even though I don't have an exact, it kind of like with how the book's going to turn out, I kind of have a sense of when it'll come out. I just don't know the exact date. So
Yeah.
I will give you the kind of a sense of when it'll come out if you want to yell at me about
Okay. Well, I'll have to go yell at you then.
it. Fair enough. And I'm always up to talk, like just with this interview, I'm always up to talk about writing or talk about the book itself. And I probably will be in a sober enough state where you won't be able to accidentally draw any spoilers out of me when I am active on Twitter. So it should be safe to talk to me about things or ask questions.
Okay. Well, Thomas, thank you for coming by. The time has just flown by, but thank
Yes,
you.
yeah. It's. I hope everything I said was good content material for you, because
Yeah.
as is usual with me when I do these things is I forget all of the things that I have said, and I just hope that I did a good job of being a good guest for you on your show.
Of course. Yeah. Don't be so. Yeah. Of course you were. Yeah. In fact, I want us. We'll talk after about doing it again. But yeah, so we'll have that conversation.
Absolutely.
But thanks a lot, and thanks everyone for watching. And I'll have all those links to contact you down below on the podcast or on YouTube in the description.
Awesome. Thank you.
We'll talk to everybody soon.
All right. Thanks, Steve.